Described as hell on earth.
Fireys are battling desperately.
For the first time, a catastrophic danger warning's been issued.
Firefighters here very concerned about those fires at Turramurra.
The RFS is saying that these conditions are going to be much worse than predicted.
11 fires.
There are 54 fires.
They've got 70 fires blazing.
Australia has lost more mammal species than any other continent and has one of the worst rates of species decline among the world's richest countries.
So pollution, mining, invasive species and climate change are to blame. Their solution, another decade, scientists say, is too late. Sarah.
What the environment really needs is a changed system. That's the message from the Samuel Review.
Australia deals with many different natural disasters, such as heat waves, bushfires, droughts, floods, severe storms, tropical cyclones, earthquakes, tsunamis, and landslides. Recently, Australia was hit by Cyclone Alfred, where 240,000 homes and businesses were left without power. The government has committed to giving income support to residents that have been affected by the storm. Natural disasters affect Australia every year, sometimes experiencing extreme droughts that cause farmers to lose their crops, meaning food shortages could happen. Bushfires also occur in Australia, the most recent being in 2019 and 2020 that damaged millions of acres. Lastly, heat waves are very common in Australia too, that cause many people to go to the hospital and sometimes even death. Climate change is affecting the Great Barrier Reef, and it's one of its biggest threats. The increase in water temperature is by 0.8 degrees Celsius and 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit. The rising water temperatures cause coral bleaching, and sometimes coral may die. Climate change is everywhere in Australia, and it needs to change now. The Australian government created an act called the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. It states providing a way for Australia to protect and manage national and international important plants, animals, habitats, and places. This will help reduce polluting areas of nature and keep plants and wildlife safe. The government also takes steps for international arrivals at the airport. Some passengers will get randomly selected to get their shoes and shirt tested for harmful dirt brought into the country. The areas that the government is trying to protect is World Heritage areas, wetland of international importance, and Commonwealth marine areas. Today we will be talking to Anna about climate change through gender and socioeconomic lenses. So Anna, can you give us a little bit of an overview of climate change and through a gender and socioeconomic lens?
Climate change affects everyone, but not everyone is affected equally. Even though the threat of climate change and its impacts are universal, the severity of how it is experienced falls disproportionately on vulnerable communities and population. In fact, the climate crisis is not gender neutral. Indeed, women often have a limited access to education, resources, and land, and therefore they are the ones who experience the greatest impact of climate change, which amplifies the gender inequalities that already exist. Internationally, the links between gender and environment issues have been recognized by numerous researchers.
How has climate change impacted different genders?
Climate change destroys existing livelihoods. Women and children are more exposed to the risk of being left behind and trapped in dangerous environments, while also expected to take care of family and household responsibilities, while men migrate to seek better livelihood and opportunities. Moreover, women who are forced to migrate are facing more risk of violence and exploiting during the displacement.
Thank you. I never realized the struggles that women have making climate change issues, and thank you for bringing that to attention again. Going on to our next question, how does an environmental issue like a drought affect livelihoods for women?
Agriculture is the most important employment sector for women in low-income countries, and during a period of drought and erratic rainfall, women as agricultural worker and primary procurer work harder to secure income and resources for their families. Indeed, women in rural and marginalized communities are primarily responsible for collecting water, but drought and changing rainfall patterns increase the time and the distance to collect the water. This puts more pressure on girls, who often have to leave school to help their mother manage the increasing burden.
Thank you again for bringing to attention environmental issues that women need to go through during these climate change times. So going on to our next question, is there any way that we can solve these problems?
To help solve this burning issue, we could think of a few solutions. At first, incorporating gender perspective into climate policy and decision making, while also supporting women's leadership in climate solutions. Moreover, we should empower women through education, awareness, and skill building to make sure that they have access to all resources.
So as a closing thought, we could say that this fight against climate change is not only protecting the environment, but also fighting for equality. Moving on to environmental issues through a cultural perspective. We'll be talking with Michelle to explain the importance of culture in environmental challenges. First off, how does the environment influence culture in Australia?
Specifically for Indigenous people, climate change has been by far the biggest issue. I'll be referring to country as the land, waters, and natural resources that are part of Aboriginal culture and heritage. Climate change has impacted the general health of the First People, in addition to landscapes, plants, and animals. Aboriginal people have been the backbone of Australian culture, but with climate change happening at an increasing rate, it's difficult for them to care for country.
Thank you for your insight regarding the general influence on Australian culture. It seems as though the Indigenous communities are those that are most affected, who are also trying to protect the country. Could you explain more specifically how these Indigenous communities are being affected?
The NSW government says Aboriginal people are living in areas that are more likely to experience extreme weather such as heat waves, droughts, and floods. Due to the lack of accessible transportation, Aboriginal people are unable to escape these issues, especially during flooding. They typically undergo heat stress and isolation. There were bushfires from 2019 to 2020 that impacted the land the community was living on. Plants and animals on the land were also lost. Coastal sites like burial grounds are becoming damaged due to coastal erosion. Lastly, rivers act as a multitude of sources for the community. Water quality is being negatively affected through droughts and pollution.
You briefly mentioned the plants and animals being affected by these environmental issues. Could you go more in depth to describe the impact it had on these?
Because of environmental issues, including climate change, plants and animals have gone extinct. The Australian megafauna were large birds, reptiles, and marsupials. Some of the animals were wombat-shaped Diprotodon and Megalania. They came into existence from glacial conditions, but it is assumed that they later became extinct due to warmer climates, also the note of climate change. According to the Australian Museum, the last ice age caused Australia's climate to go from cold dry to warm dry, leaving these animals unable to care for themselves in the new climate. Plants, on the other hand, are most affected by habitat destruction. The Australian State of Environment says small remnants are left behind from the destruction and then left vulnerable to other pressures. The plant species at the most risk of extinction are mostly located in newly developed agricultural and urban landscapes.
What is the government currently doing to protect these communities, and is there anything else that can still be done?
Indigenous communities, especially in the Torres Strait Islands, are secluded from the rest of the country, which makes it one of the most difficult places to access resources. These people did not have their rights on this land, so they had to fight for it in court and won. Currently, though, it isn't the government threatening them, it's the sea and water. There are no laws at the moment protecting the island and its inhabitants from climate change, but the Torres Strait, including the Native Title Act, the Queensland Environmental Protection Act, the Tort of Negligence, the Tort of Public Nuisance and International Human Rights Law, might be able to protect them. The government needs to continue to work to a stronger act on these laws.
Thank you both for your insights through a gender and cultural lens through nature.